My name is Father Mark Reyes, S.J. And if you think Jesuits don't scare easy, you'd be right. Until you put one under fluorescent lights with a chain that sings back. 3 days after Thanksgiving, Cardinal Anton Valley called me in Boston. Valley's voice always sounded like an elevator bell, a pleasant chime before doors that never quite opened all the way. "Father Reyes," he said, "how do you feel about Pennsylvania?" "I like their baseball," I said. "I'm neutral on their scrapple." He didn't laugh. "Pack an overnight bag, 2 suits, 1 cassock, ritual books. The simple cross will do. We're sending you to St. Kieran's, Greene County." "Isn't St. Kieran's shuttered?" "Exactly." The line held all the things he didn't want on a recording. I said, "Yes, Eminence," hung up, and stood at my kitchen window long enough to watch last leaves become gray sidewalk paste. I told my pastor I'd be back in a few days. He gave me a look that said he'd heard "few days from Rome" before. The car from the diocese met me at PIT and took roads that traded glass towers for brick, then brick for corrugated tin, then tin for the skeletal outlines of mills that had made a nation and then forgot how. Greene County's hills arrived with the stubbornness of winter. Not quite snow, not quite surrender. St. Kieran's Basilica sat on its own small hill like a tired prizefighter, beautiful in the way of things whose glory required you to imagine the light they used to catch. The parish had been deconsecrated a decade ago. The plywood over the side door boasted a fading, "No trespassing" sign next to a brand new lock. 2 trucks idled near the steps, 1 diocesan, 1 municipal. The 3rd vehicle was unmarked federal. I threaded my Roman collar with fingers that always ached in cold and followed a maintenance man inside. The nave smelled like lemon, oil, dust, and rain that had learned to find pinholes. St. Kieran's ceiling still held its sky, blue fading to green around saints whose faces flaked like snow. Statues wore drop cloths like winter coats. Every Rust Belt church knows this fashion. We passed the transept, then a hallway lit by rental lamps, and stopped at a flight of stone stairs that went down into breath that had never warmed. At the landing, Agent Ellis nodded like he'd approved me before I introduced myself. "Father," Ellis said. He had the sort of voice that belonged to a man who never needed to shout and a tie that not even his mother would have picked. We kept it quiet. One of the city crews caved a wall in the crypt, called the diocese when they saw the chain. The diocese called your people. What exactly did they see? He started walking. Enough to understand other people should see it. The crypt had been cleared of its old bronze nameplates and votive stands. A rental dehumidifier hummed with the confidence of machines who think they are winning. In the far corner, a square of wall had collapsed. The air that came through had a taste to it, like someone had just struck a match and then swallowed the flame. We stepped through into a room not on any church blueprint, round, chalk white, ribbed like the inside of a shell. In the center, on a raised stone dais, sat a man shackled to an iron stanchion by a chain that looked like it had been braided by a mathematician with a grudge. He looked up when we entered, blinked once, and smiled. It wasn't a threatening smile. It was the kind a man gives you in a grocery store when you're both reaching for the last carton of eggs. "Hello," he said. His voice had last been fashionable on AM radio. "Is it Sunday?" "It's Wednesday," I said, because someone should answer. He nodded like that made sense too. His hair was too long for a seminarian and too tidy for a drifter. His eyes were the bright, earnest blue of old family photographs, the kind where the background is 3 shades of gray and the subject believes in the future. "Name?" I asked. He looked at the iron, not me. I used to be Caleb Hale. You used to be, Agent Ellis repeated gently. Caleb frowned at the chain as if searching for the word used. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be difficult. It's Wednesday. Dr. Nora Whitaker stood opposite me, her hospital ID clipped to a parka. Nora's eyes carried the long emergency department night shift, curious, calibrated, a little done with the theatrics of men. She gave me a look doctors reserve for clergy. Don't get in the way and don't make promises I have to cash. We ran a dental comparison, she said, and took a fingerprint. They match a missing seminarian from St. Kieran's, 1971, 23 years old when he well. She gestured to the chain, declared dead. His parents got a mass card. There's a stone in the cemetery with his name on it. But he's here, I said. And 23, she said. It's medically impolite. Brother Oakes hovered near the chain with the respectful fear of an engineer standing near a bridge whose math he can't explain. It's not steel, he said before I asked. It takes a file like tempered, but it doesn't spark like it, and the filings don't oxidize. The braid is, Father, this thing is a Möbius done in 3 dimensions on 3 strands. You can't manufacture that without cutting, and these aren't cut. They're grown. Grown, I repeated. He shrugged with both hands. We don't have a verb. Is it blessed? I asked. Oakes actually snorted. It doesn't care about holy water, I tried. It dried like it enjoyed it. I walked to the dais. The chain lay across Caleb's lap like an obedient dog. Up close, the metal held etchings not made by any tool I knew, narrow lines that didn't so much lie on the surface as exist in it, a grain that spelled something to anyone who could read a language made of surfaces. May I asked. Caleb looked down at the iron like I'd inquired about a borrowed tie. It's mostly well-behaved. My Jesuit training insisted on paperwork and patience. My Boston upbringing suggested try something simple. I took the little wooden cross from my pocket, the cheap kind parents buy in bulk for First Communion. I held it above the chain. Nothing. I touched the cross to the iron. Everything. Heat ran up the wood like sap in spring. The cross didn't burn but rearranged in my hand, its grain making a slow, deliberate decision, lines turning from random into script so old my eyes knew it before I did. I yanked the wood back on instinct. The new letters still crawled, searching for an alphabet I'd been taught to doubt. What does it say? Nora asked. I don't know, I said, which was true and not. Read like a prayer, but not to anything. A prayer that did not beg but bound, not a petition, but a rehearsal of facts reality had to remember if it wanted to keep working. Agent Ellis didn't move. He didn't breathe, or he hid it well. Don't do that again, he said, as politely as a threat knows how. Noted, I said. Caleb spoke without looking up. It's friendlier when you sing. Excuse me, Nora asked. He tilted his head. Hums more than sings, the cross. It liked you. The chain likes you too, Brother Oakes. It's just embarrassed. Metal can't be embarrassed, Oakes said automatically. Then it's the other thing, Caleb said. That word where something is 2 things at once. Ambivalent, I offered. No, he said. Wednesday. The room listened to its own echo long enough for our nerves to shake hands. I crouched to Caleb's eye level and did the thing most priests do even when they shouldn't. I tried to comfort. Do you know how long you've been down here? Caleb's mouth made the shape of arithmetic. 3 days. He glanced at the chain. 31, 300. I think I had a birthday. We found no water, no food, no waste, Nora said softly. His vitals look like a healthy young adult except for a phase lag I've never seen. All his circadian markers run a little late. His cortisol peak happens after he wakes up. Do you wake up? I asked Caleb. Sometimes I wake up, he said. Other times Wednesday does. I stood, let my knees complain, and looked at the iron again. Jesuits learned to love maps. The chain was a map, but not of a place. It diagrammed a constraint, how to tie a world to a shape it didn't want to be tied to. I've read canon law that worked like this. We call them definitions. Agent Ellis checked a watch that did not make noise. We need to move him, he said, soon, before the local paper learns the city leased St. Kieran's and decides to ask why. We're not taking him to a hospital, Nora said, not a question. No, Ellis said, we'll take the hospital to him. Brother Oakes cleared his throat. Father. I followed his eyes to the chain where it draped over Caleb's left wrist. The etchings there had settled, no longer crawling but aligned into a tiny ladder of marks arranged like staffs in an old chant book. 4 little bars, each with a bruise-colored dot. I didn't realize I was humming until Nora touched my elbow. Are you hearing that in your head, or? We all went very still. The chain hummed back. Not loud, not a note for ears. More like a thought someone else started for you, a tune people who work night shift learn to hear in vending machines and fridges that know exactly when to kick on. My cross warmed in my pocket as if embarrassed by earlier enthusiasm. This will surprise no one, Nora said, but I hate this. Don't, Caleb said. It hates being hated. What is it? I asked. He shrugged toward the iron, not the chain. What then? Caleb's eyes moved to the far wall, the curved chalk, the seam where church stone met something older. What's between? The air, Oakes said. Caleb gave him a look of gentle apology. Closer than that. Agent Ellis took a small step back as if space were a chair and he just remembered it had legs. Father Rays, he said, we have a transport unit designed for situations that require discretion. We'll insulate him, bring in a contractor crew tonight, and nobody will know St. Kieran's grew a basement. We need a canonical framework, I said automatically, a bureaucrat's life preserver. Miracle investigation requires we classify, Ellis finished, not unkindly. Fraud, delusion, intrusion, or sanctity. I've read your playbooks. Have you read ours? I asked. Yes, he said. Chapter that says when you encounter something that doesn't make sense, tell it to wait until a man in a different hat arrives. Nora snorted. It sounded like forgiveness. I'll prep fluids, labs we can run here. If he's been down here 3 days or 3,000, I want baseline blood. Take what you need, Ellis said. Just no needles. Nora blinked. He's shackled by an alien rosary, and needles are where you draw the line. Ellis's mouth considered a smile and declined. If you try to break his skin, the texture changes. Explain that. Can't, he said. Won't, he added, and made them mean the same thing. I placed my palm above the chain without touching. The air was warmer, not hot, committed. I felt the way you do in a chapel after Mass, how the room keeps its breath held because it remembers the words. Caleb, I said, do you know why you went down here in 1971? He blinked like the year had an aftertaste. I thought I heard singing. He considered. It sounded like home, or he searched the ceiling for permission. Like the space between home and the front door, when your hands are still cold and you're trying not to drop the bag. I thought of my mother's apartment on Gano Street, the wheeze of the radiator, the way winter made you carry every grocery like a liturgy. What did you find? I asked. He looked at the chain, then at me for the first time as if I'd finally entered the room. I found it already open. What did? Wednesday, he said very gently. I'm sorry, that's not being helpful. It's as helpful as most of what I read, I said, and he smiled like that was permission to hope. Agent Ellis checked his watch again. The watch checked him back. We move in 30 minutes. Move him where? Nora asked. Ellis watched the chain. A chapel without windows. Prison, she said. Insurance, he said. I made the sign of the cross with my thumb inside my pocket, felt the warm would remember its new grain. Interlinear, my brain said, the word we use for texts that carry two languages at once, one on top of the other, neither complete without the other's shadow. The chain carried meanings depending on where you stood, who you were, what you feared. I stepped backward to take the circle in. The chalk walls weren't chalk at all. They were memory, the way stone remembers oceans, the way bones remember breakfasts. Brittle ridges ran around the room at the height of a kneeler, as if generations had prayed here in a posture designed by something that didn't care about knees. Brother, I said to Oakes, if you were going to anchor a load the size of a cathedral, what shape would you choose? Circle, he said instantly. Load distributes. Nothing snaps first, and if you needed to tie a knot that could never be untied. Oakes looked at the chain. I'd make a knot that never starts. That's nonsense, Nora said. So is cancer, Oakes replied. It works. Ellis raised a hand, listening to something I couldn't hear. Perimeter clear, Father, say what you need to say. I crouched again. Caleb, I said, you're going to feel motion soon. There will be people in suits that make them look brave. We're taking you somewhere warmer. You'll hear the chain sing differently. If you can tell me when the song changes, I can. I didn't finish. I didn't know what I could do. I could write a report. I could classify a miracle. I could ask permission to ask permission. Caleb squinted at me like he was trying to place where in the grocery store he'd seen me before. You're kind, he said. It makes it louder. What does? The part between the notes. I don't hear notes, Nora said. You do, he said. You just call them beeps. Ellis's crew arrived then, 2 men, 1 woman, indistinguishable in dull white suits that breathed for them. They brought a stretcher that wasn't a stretcher and a case that wasn't a case. When they set the case on the floor, the chain lifted its head like a dog who recognizes a leash. Father, Ellis said, and I knew what he wanted, a prayer. The old machinery, the Anglophone spell that tells suffering you see it. I took my simple cross out again. Its grain shimmered as if embarrassed to be wood. I held it where Caleb could see and where I could check whether my hands were steady. May I asked. He nodded once. Please don't lie. The request stung in the way that told me it was fair. I began in Latin because Latin borrows your spine and because the chain seemed to prefer consonants you could land on. Deus, refugium nostrum et virtus, populum ad te clamentum propitius respice. I didn't ask to break chains. I don't ask iron to be something it isn't. I asked for clarity, for a name that tells a thing how to be itself without killing you for the favor. The chain hummed. So did the cross. The dehumidifier stuttered like it had found God. Nora exhaled, and the exhale fogged in the warm room. Oakes rested his fingers on the chain and flinched like it apologized in a language his skin remembered from childhood. Okay, Ellis said, which meant go. The crew unclasped a section of the braid. No, not unclasped. It decided to be open there, and we agreed. They lifted Caleb like you lift a sleeping baby, keep the head safe, pretend it won't wake. They set him in the Nara stretcher. The case unfolded around him like a confessional, and the first buckle made a sound I will hear when I die. Not metal on metal, not click, consent. Before the top closed, Caleb looked at me from inside his careful box. Father, he said, like a man about to ask you to hold his place in line. When the numbers change. What numbers? You'll know, don't be late. The lid sealed. The chain sang a single line that my bones chose to understand as amen, and every rented lamp blinked at once. Agent Ellis checked his watch. Don't say it, Nora whispered. Ellis said it anyway. It's 3:17 a.m. I looked down at my cheap cross. The grain, no longer crawling, had settled into a vertical script even my cowardice could read. It did not say save us. It did not say let me out. It said, in a language that arranges reality before it asks, keep choosing. That was when sent Kieran's organ, unpowered and unloved for 10 long winters, played a single perfect chord the way a person sighs when they've found the right key and would like very much to come inside. If you want to know what a country believes, don't read its laws, watch what its people tuck into basements. The chapel without windows wasn't a chapel. It was a worship-optional room in a federal building with the kind of carpeting that makes you nostalgic for concrete. Someone had tried. A standing cross from a catalog, a votive table with battery-operated candles, a framed print of a dove that looked like it was late for a wedding. The room felt like a good intention that never learned your name. They rolled Caleb in like he was an idea no one could afford to drop. The case breathed for him with a hush-hush rhythm that made my own lungs offended. Agent Ellis signed 3 things on a clipboard that was pretending not to be digital and nodded to me in that federal way. You can speak, as long as you only say what the room would say. Doctor, Nora Whitaker set her mobile cart where the altar should have been. She traded her parka for navy scrubs and a sweater, a necklace with a silver disc she thumbed when she was thinking. Brother Oakes opened a tool bag like a priest opening a monstrance, careful, reverent, ready to be wrong. I set my ritual books on a folding chair and tried not to look like I'd brought the wrong hat to a weather report. The case's lid earized open. The chain lay across Caleb like an obedient seatbelt that was learning pronouns. His eyes were closed. Color had returned to his face as if the box had a thermostat set to farmhouse kitchen. The chain's etchings, the lines that weren't quite scratches, weren't quite script, looked different from St. Kieran's. The room had given them a new handwriting. Vital stable, Nora said, reading numbers anyone else would have called coordinates. Pulse 68, O2 99, temp 98.6 because jokes. Pupils equal and reactive. He sedated but lightly. Nothing invasive, Ellis reminded the room, pretending it wasn't for her. Nora didn't look up. I'm very good at not poking things that bite. Brother Oakes crouched near the chain and didn't touch it. Light's different here, he murmured. The ceiling's LED panel hummed that hospital hum, a sound electricians describe as within spec and patients describe as there. When it brightened, the chain's etchings moved, not crawled this time, but advanced, frame by frame, like a flipbook someone thumbed too slowly. Under fluorescent truth, the letters kept choosing. You seeing that? Nora asked. LED strobe, Oakes said. 60 times a second. Cameras argue with it. Maybe so does metal that isn't. Brother, I said, you brought a hand lens. He handed me a monocular loupe a jeweler might envy. Up close, the etchings weren't grooves, they were micro-reliefs, hills and valleys with angles Euclid would have filed a complaint about. As the panel above ticked through its invisible flicker, those angles threw micro-shadows that changed the sentence. It's interlinear, I said. English father, Nora said, friendly as a scalpel. 2 texts in one, I said, moving the loop as the room blinked. A prayer on top of a prayer. What it says depends on where and who you are when you read it. Like scripture, she said, half a smile, half a dare. Like blueprints, Oakes offered, eyes gone far. Same lines, different scale. Like case law, Ellis said, surprising us all. I looked at him. He looked at the chain. The chain looked busy. Test it, Nora said. She liked verbs that caught. We started small because Americans believe in small before they trust large. I opened my bag and took out the cheap wooden cross from St. Kieran's. It felt warm the way a window feels warm at noon from the idea of sun. I held it near the chain, so close the air could gossip. Under the loop, the strokes aligned into the kind of Latin my professors called legal, the kind canonists stitch to their tongue so they don't have to taste opinion. It wasn't the exorcistic formulas. It wasn't the psalmic pleadings. It read like a definition that won an argument one counsel at a time. Ligatura non est precatio. Est memoria qui tenet rem est sapsum. A binding is not a prayer. It is a memory that keeps a thing being itself. I said it out loud without meaning to. Nora's eyebrows did the thing eyebrows do when words rearrange your furniture. Now without the cross, she said. I lowered the wood. The ceiling blinked. The etchings shook off their Latin and took on a different poise, still lines, still meaning, but no longer inflected toward anything I recognized. They looked like measures, short stacks like a hymn in notation I couldn't sing. Dr. Whitaker, I said. She stepped closer until we shared breath made polite by winter. Through the loop, the lines reassembled into med math. She read it before I did, because some languages live in your blood. Dosage instructions without units, intervals without minutes, but the shape of dosing was there. Start low, go slow, watch the kidneys, ask the patient. Her lips moved silently. I watched her mouth remember residency. What do you see? I asked. She swallowed. It's telling me how not to hurt him. Now you, I said to Oakes. He leaned in as if the chain might ask him to dance. The letters funneled, tightened, resolved into schematics a Navy machinist would have dated, stresses redistributed in a spiral, forces never allowed to begin, a load path that refused the concept of a first point. Oakes whistled through his teeth. It's showing me how to hang a world without a hook, he said. We looked at Ellis. He didn't move. Your turn, I said. He stepped in like a man stepping onto ice he'd known all his life. The etchings snapped to attention, lined up into policy, not words, but the shape of words that build agencies, scope, authority, limitations, process, appeal. He blinked once like a train changing tracks without telling the passengers. What does it say? Nora asked. He considered. It's a compliance framework you can live in if you choose to. Choose is doing a lot of work, I said. He nodded. Yes. The chain lay in Caleb's lap like we had bored it. It hummed, not for ears, inside the head like a tooth that remembers sugar. I took a slow breath to remind it who owned the lungs. Objects change it, Nora said, ticking off an invisible list. People change it. What about language? I opened the ritual book to the Psalms, not the exorcisms, not yet. Psalm 23 is a hammer I try not to hit everything with, but you don't learn the Psalms to leave them folded. Dominus regit me. The Lord is my shepherd. The etchings recognized a cadence older than my mouth. They didn't switch back to Latin. They blended my Psalms bones under Nora's dosage, under Oakes's load, under Ellis's compliance. The lines thickened as if calligraphy had muscle, as if meaning ate protein. Again, Nora said, and there was a tremor in her voice not from fear but from recognition. I read Psalm 139 because it understands basements. Si ascendero in caelum, tu alic ease. Si descendero in infernum ades. If I rise to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. The chain's letters made a decision. The interlinear became interbodies. It was no longer two texts in one but four, nested, a chorus arranged for a room. Each line knew the other lines were there. Each held without crossing. I felt something in my chest say yes and something on the back of my neck say not yet. Try English, Nora said, not unkindly like I'd been showing off. I read in English. The letters didn't pout. They took the words and did the same, rearranging at the edges of meaning until our room and our mouths matched. It wasn't translation. It was accommodation, the way a good host moves a chair. That's enough scripture for now, Ellis said, not as an order, as if he'd felt the floor lift a little. Nora glanced at her card. I'd like a vein, she said. One, no needles, I remember, we can. She tapped the spot between thumb and wrist. Near-infrared works. If he's perfusing normally, I should be able to see the pattern. Ellis looked at the chain the way hunters look at weather. Do it. Then, almost apologetically, as long as you don't break the skin, Nora turned a small device on, NIR imaging in a box the size of a paperback. The screen painted Caleb's hand in false veins, blue-green rivers under skin that had the decency to be human. The chain's hum rose, curious, like something leaning over a crib. There, Nora said. Radial, ulnar, palmar arch complete. He's textbook. She angled the light so it grazed the chain. The etchings advanced under the strobe like animation, each flicker a new glyph in the same sentence. My loop showed a field of micro-shadows marching, each shadow a choice. Hold it, I said. Freeze the frame. I can't, she said. It's a live source. Then move slower, Oakes said, already reaching to adjust the device like a DJ working a crossfader. He dialed the frequency down. The strobe slowed. The letters stopped flipping and settled on an arrangement that made the room take a breath it had been holding since we walked in. I copied with my phone, immediate shame flush, and then the surrender we make to remember. The etched phrase was not in Latin or English. It was in shape, a straight line that refused to be straight, a spiral that knew where the center was but declined to visit, a ladder whose rungs didn't join the rails but still held. Father, Nora said. It's saying, I tried, that we can ask a thing to keep being itself if we promise to keep being ourselves beside it. That's not language, Ellis said, but his voice was softer. It is, I said. It's the language you use when you teach a kid how to carry something heavy. You say, lift with me. We drew lots of little lines that meant keep choosing without letters. The chain pretended not to notice, which means it did. Water, Nora said suddenly. What about it? I asked. She poured a little from a bottle into a paper cup and set the cup near the chain. The meniscus, that thin, curved rim water puts on for formal occasions, stiffened. I watched the surface tension take a stance. The letters on the chain adjusted like a man shifting his weight to make room in a pew. You bless it, she said, looking at me, and let's see if the song changes. I blessed it. Habit made my thumb twitch. The water didn't ripple. The chain did, a half note higher, a minor third like an organist feeling out a key. Unblessed, blessed. Unblessed, blessed. The chain's hum tracked the change like it had microphones for conscience. Oakes held a set of calibration forks over it. 440, 432, machinist voodoo. The forks sang what they were. The chain answered only the recently blessed, not louder but clear, a ringing that felt like clicking a pen you aren't supposed to click during a meeting and finding the click speaks. It responds to commitment, I said. Nora nodded. To recency, she said. To now. Ellis tapped his watch. The watch pretended not to be insulted. We worked until hours stopped coming with names. The chain learned us, and we learned it in the American way, one test at a time, as if the room could be litigated. Between trials, I sat in a folding chair that wanted a better life and wrote in my ledger, "Canonists write when we can't fix." I wrote questions as if questions could be offense. Is this a miracle? No, not in the old sense. Miracles are God doing physics his way. This was physics doing memory our way. Is this a possession? If so, it possesses inwards, not invasion but recursion. What is the chain? A grammar, a promise, a machine that keeps the room from forgetting itself. What is Caleb? A man in a sentence that's learning future tense. When I looked up, Nora was watching me with the expression doctors reserve for people they like against better judgment. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes," I lied. She thumbed the silver disc at her throat. "He needs an environment that won't argue with him," she said, flirting with the kind of metaphysics E.R. doctors learn to hide. If your chain keeps tuning to whatever we bring near, we have to be careful what we stand beside him with. Meaning. Don't put a thunderstorm next to a kite. Oaks leaned back on his heels. If this is a structure, it's the kind that builds itself as you watch. Observers aren't passive. Quantum, I said, because Jesuits are annoying at parties. Human, he said, because engineers are worse. Caleb stirred. The sedation had the courtesy to leave slowly. His eyes opened like a man waking on a couch that belongs to a relative he loves and doesn't know. "Wednesday?" he asked, and then laughed, gentle, like apologizing to a dog for stepping on its tail. "Sorry, hello." "Hello," Nora said. "You're safe." He looked at the ceiling panel, the hum, the chain, me. "It's not a chapel," he said. "No," I said. "It's trying," he said. "Yes," I said. He looked at my hand where it rested on my knee, at the cheap cross that had decided it wanted to be a fountain pen. "It likes you," he said. "I'm fine with unrequited," I said. His smile made me believe he knew grocery stores too. "Caleb," I said, and there is a way to say a name that builds a small bridge. We're learning how the chain reads us. It responds to who's beside it, to what we bring. He considered, eyes following something near the ceiling that none of us could see and all of us had learned to pretend not to. "It's like a choir," he said. "How?" "The chain knows the melody," he said. "People are harmony. Some people are better at holding their part." "Who's tone deaf?" Nora asked, neutral. He flicked his eyes to Ellis and away, quick, apologetic. "He hears a different key," he said. Ellis didn't bristle. He never does. He simply looked at the door like men who know how doors work. "Can you read it?" I asked Caleb, nodding at the etchings. He squinted, leaned his head to one side like you do when furniture almost fits. "Only when someone else is looking." "Interlinear," I said again to myself. "Dinner?" he asked, and then smiled like the joke had already been made better in another room. Nora hooked the NIR device again, gentle. "We're going to try something soft." She told him, "No needles, I promise." "Needles are fine," he said. "Not for me," Ellis murmured. Caleb looked at his own wrist like a man scanning a menu. "The numbers are wrong," he said. "What numbers?" I asked. "The ones that tick," he said. "They think they are alone." I checked my watch without meaning to. 12:47. My stomach did math with airline peanuts. "Tell me when they are right," I said. He closed his eyes. The chain hummed contentment or consent, I couldn't tell and maybe shouldn't. The LED panel brightened, dimmed, brightened. Under the loop, the letters kept stepping, flipbook pages turning under a thumb the room couldn't stop. We ran more trials. A blessed ring, a metal ruler, a photo on Nora's phone of her kid's science fair volcano. Each time the chain changed only if the thing brought near had been loved recently. Old prayers worked, but new prayers moved the line farther. It was the opposite of museums. Provenance mattered less than proximity. If you were here, you mattered. "American," Nora said. "No offense, Father." None taken, I said. Our sacraments are old, our choices are fresh. The chain likes fresh. Or it's training us, Ellis said, and something in his tone came from a part of him with a badge no one issues. Training us to what? I asked. To stand where we are on purpose, he said. Oak stretched his back until it popped. I'm starving, he announced, truthful as a tool. We sent for food. The facility had a cafeteria that served 4 kinds of courage: coffee, eggs, powdered potatoes, and those little cereal boxes that make grown men remember cartoons. I ate egg and cheese on a roll that had been a roll in another life, because this is how you outlast nights. You put something warm in a body and tell it you're sorry. When I came back, the chain was quieter, which is how it tells you it's listening harder. Nora's silver disc rested between her collarbones. Ellis had a styrofoam cup that said coffee in case he forgot. Oakes was drawing knots on a legal pad that understood it wasn't law. I stood in the doorway a second, letting the room see me again. A Jesuit trick: make an entrance even when you don't. A thought arrived the way thoughts sometimes do, whole, unsummoned, obvious once it lands. The cross, I said to Nora. How long since I blessed it at St. Kieran's? Hours, she said. Why? It cooled, I said. When it was new blessed, it warmed on contact. Now not so much. Like bread, Oakes said. Stale. Like consent, Ellis said, because he has courage too. I took the cross out. It was room temperature, which is to say, emotionally distant. I blessed it again, not theatrically, just enough for God to roll his eyes and do the thing anyway. The wood sighed, not really, but if wood could. I held it over the chain. The etching snapped to a pattern I hadn't seen, not Latin, not dosing, not schematics or policy. It looked like breath written down, the rise and fall people do, the tiny holds between exhale and inhale where you decide if you plan to be a person for another minute. Keep choosing, I said, hearing it more than reading. Say it again, Caleb whispered, eyes still closed. Keep choosing, I said. The chain sang one quiet line that vibrated the cheap votives, and every battery candle flickered in unison like a congregation remembering a refrain. I've had moments in my life where God felt less like a person and more like a choice. This was one of them. The room had made a small vow while no one was looking. Okay, Nora said softly, like a nurse saying the hard part's over when it's not. Okay. I wrote again because writing is how I keep my hands from doing other things. Classification, draft. Phenomenon exhibits interlinear semiotics that respond to proximity of blessed objects, professional habitus, medicine, engineering, law, and spoken intention. The chain may be an interface, not a restraint. It co-authors with the observer. It wants a choir. Theological note: if choice is the sacrament of attention, this room is a font. I didn't show anyone that line. At 2:51 a.m., the facility's HVAC sighed like a man getting out of his chair. The LED panel dimmed one extra notch as if consulting a manual. Somewhere a compressor started the way summer storms do, quietly, then as if angry you noticed. Caleb opened his eyes. They looked bluer because the room had decided to be gray. He turned his head toward me like we'd been mid-conversation for months. Father, he said. Yes, I said. The numbers, he said, and he sounded relieved like he'd remembered a friend's name. They're almost right. How do you know? Nora asked. He blinked, and the blink felt like a page turn. Because Wednesday is here. Which means, Ellis said. Caleb looked at the chain. The chain looked at the ceiling. Ceiling looked at the country it worked for. It means we're about to skip, he said. Skip what? Oakes asked. Caleb smiled, apologetic. Everything that thinks it's keeping time. There are moments you can feel coming even if you don't know their names. This one had been walking toward us since the organ in St. Kieran's remembered how to breathe. I felt it in my molars first, then in my pocket where the cross warmed like a hand. Nora's necklace swung without air. Oakes's pencil rolled uphill. "Father," Ellis said, voice level, "if you're going to say a thing, say it now." "I don't know what thing," I said, which is also a prayer. The LED panel flickered in a pattern you can't buy, a fast slow that made the chain's letters align into now. The battery votives blinked in time with it like they'd found a choir director. The NIR device hissed and rebooted itself because machines avoid discomfort too. I checked my watch because that's what I've been taught to do when I can't fix it. Document. 3:16 a.m. My stomach remembered childhood bedsheets, a clock with red digits that could shame you for breathing. "Okay," Nora said. "Everyone breathe with me." "On my mark," Ellis said, because someone has to be command even in a church. "Mark," Brother Oakes said, unhelpful and delighted at his own joke. The chain hummed. It hummed the way air hums in big empty rooms before an orchestra sits. It hummed like a dial that has only been pretending to be round. It hummed like a throat finding a key. My watch ticked. It ticked again. It did not tick a third time. Every clock in the room, my watch, Nora's phone, the panel over the door, the little 7-segment lyre on the medical cart, skipped. No fading, no blur, no drama. The digits were 2:59:3:003:17. The missing minutes did not protest their eviction. All 4 battery candles went out and then on as one. The chain's hum settled into a single note that every choir calls home. Something like wind moved through a room with no windows. Caleb exhaled. It sounded like a man setting down a grocery bag. "Wednesday," he said, and smiled the saddest smile I'd seen since my father told me he was ready to go. Agent Ellis didn't look at his watch. He looked at the door. On it, someone had taped a printout earlier, laminated, with the emergency exit path and a cute little stick figure running. I'd noticed it when we came in and didn't think about it because Americans wallpaper with liability. The arrow used to point left. At 3:17 a.m., the laminated arrow pointed right. No one moved. The chain waited with us the way trains wait with tracks. "Don't be late," Caleb had said in the crypt, and I heard it now as if the room had decided to put subtitles on. Ellis spoke without taking his eyes off the door. "We lock this down," he said, voice so soft the air had to lean in, "but we are going to have to open that." "Why?" Nora asked, equally quiet. "Because right now," he said, "that door doesn't lead to a hallway." He didn't say where it led. He didn't have to. The chain had already read it in us, written it on itself, and hummed a note a child could follow. I put my hand on my pocket cross. It was warm again, not hot, awake. "Mark," Nora said, and I realized it was the first time she'd said my first name like she wasn't trying it on. "Whatever we do next, we do it together." "Interlinear," I said. "Choir," Caleb corrected kindly. The battery candles blinked once, yes. All the clocks in the room held 3:17 like a promise you can only keep if you keep choosing. The laminated arrow kept pointing right. And somewhere beneath the carpeting and the paint and the polite dove, the building's bones made a new sound I'd hear again and again in my sleep. A very old knot remembering its 7th rung. If you've never stood in a hallway that has decided not to be a hallway, don't. You start believing walls are suggestions and suggestions are obligations. At 3:17 a.m., the laminated fire exit printout kept pointing right. It was still glossy, still taped with the kind of scotch that outlives marriages, But the stick-figure runner had new confidence. His path now turned into space the building didn't own. Agent Ellis stared at it like it owed him money. Nora tapped her phone as if apps could shame time into honesty. Brother Oakes drew a knot on his legal pad, pressed the pen harder, tore the page, and didn't notice. I touched the door handle. It was warm. Not hot like machinery, not body warm like skin. Decision warm. The kind of warmth you feel when someone just said yes to a marriage proposal in the next room. "Father," Ellis said, "don't." "I'm not opening it," I lied. "You are," Caleb said from the case. He hadn't raised his voice. His eyes stayed closed. He was listening the way dogs listen for the exact car engine that means their owner is home. "It's not a door anymore," he murmured. "It's a seam." "Between what?" Nora asked. "Between here and where St. Kieran's remembers itself." We opened it anyway. The hallway beyond didn't belong to federal architecture. Gone was the bland drywall and fluorescent etiquette. In its place, rough chalk-white stone ribbed in long arcs like the inside of a rib cage. Electric work lights on tripods had been set up, ours, not theirs, but the light was wrong. It bent, slid, pooled in corners it shouldn't have fit into. Brother Oakes stepped first. "Quarry," he said, his engineer's instinct snapping to attention. He knelt, rubbed dust between thumb and forefinger. "Local limestone, cut by hand, pre-industrial. This isn't basement. This is older than the parish, older than the town," I said. We walked. The walls carried impressions that weren't tool marks, curves and indentations like ropes pressed into wet clay then pulled free. The shapes twisted back on themselves. You could almost convince yourself they were knots. Nora stopped at one, traced it with her eyes, not her fingers. "That's not random, that's a design language." "Language for what?" I asked. She didn't answer, but the silver disc at her throat swung like a pendulum hunting true north. We reached a chamber maybe 30 feet across. Circular, domed, cut from the same chalky stone. And on the walls, impressions. Not carvings, not etchings, impressions. As though rope the size of an arm had been pressed deep and then dissolved. Oaks circled, wide-eyed. "These are knots you can't tie, Möbius loops layered on themselves. They'd collapse if you tried with rope, but here," he slapped the stone, which answered like bone. "They hold." "Blueprints?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, instructions. This isn't about building something. It's about keeping something from building itself." Nora swallowed, her gaze locked on one impression that almost looked like a ladder twisted into infinity. "Or it's an organism, not decoration, not structure, fossil memory of something that lived here." I made the sign of the cross, not out of faith, out of reflex. Behind us, the chain hummed inside Caleb's case. It wasn't song this time. It was echo like it had been here before. Caleb stirred, eyes still closed, but his mouth opening with someone else's cadence. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Why not?" I asked, though my skin already knew. "Because the quarry isn't dead. It only rests when nobody looks. You woke it up." Nora moved closer, knelt by his side. "Caleb, who's speaking?" He opened both eyes, blue but layered like two depths of ocean fighting for the same surface. "Myself," he said, "and the one who walked ahead of me." "The one who what?" "The second voice," he whispered. "The echo you'll hear 6 seconds from now." And then 6 seconds later, the walls repeated him perfectly, syllable for syllable. Not reverberation, not echo, replay. Ellis's face went sheet white. "We're leaving," he said flatly, but the quarry had opinions. As Ellis turned toward the exit, the laminated printout on the door peeled off and drifted to the floor. The stick figure on it was running still, but now the arrow pointed down. The chamber floor trembled. Dust fell in lazy spirals. One of the knot impressions began to glow faintly, lines of pale green light crawling outward like veins refilling after a tourniquet. Oakes swore in the language of men who don't believe in swearing. It's activating, the stones remembering itself. I lifted my cross. It warmed instantly, so fast I almost dropped it. Caleb laughed softly inside his case, a laugh that wasn't joy. "Wednesday found the choir," he said. "What does that mean?" I demanded. His blue eyes opened again, and this time they weren't looking at me. They were looking through me down to somewhere the quarry was waking up. "It means," he said, "the chain isn't the only thing that sings." The floor cracked, just a hairline, just enough for air to whistle through, and what came up wasn't air. It was breath. Breath from something too large to fit in stone, too patient to care about years, too old to have a name. Back in the federal chapel's basement, the case that held Caleb shuddered once and then settled, like a sleeper turning over. The hum of the chain matched the frequency of the walls we just walked through in the quarry. Ellis replayed the audio we captured down there, Caleb's words. The second voice, you'll hear it 6 seconds later. On the recording, sure enough, 6 seconds after Caleb spoke, his voice repeated. Identical. No reverb, no distortion, not an echo, a replay. "Loop back?" Nora asked, though her voice said she already hated the theory. Oakes shook his head. "Echoes degrade, this is duplication. The quarry doesn't bounce sound, it stores it." Ellis looked at me. "Test it, say something we'll regret." I stood near the chain and spoke clearly, in principio erat verbum. In the beginning was the word. The words lived in the air. We all waited. At exactly 6 seconds the chamber answered me with my own voice, syllable perfect. But the replay carried one difference. The tone was just slightly off, deeper, more tired, as though an older version of me had said it. Nora's fingers dug into her necklace. "It's not just repeating," she said. "It's revoicing, like it's taking your words and showing you what they'll sound like later." "Later when?" Oakes asked. Caleb stirred inside his case, eyes still closed. "Later when you're more honest." Oakes, ever the engineer, tried next. He leaned in close and said, "Steel fails at stress points." 6 seconds later the quarry gave it back, but the replay swapped fails for remembers. "Steel remembers at stress points," he swore under his breath. "It's correcting me." Nora went pale, not correcting, reframing. "It knows what you mean, not what you said." "Or what I'll mean tomorrow," Oakes muttered. Ellis had been silent until then. He walked to the case, bent low to Caleb, and asked, "What is the second voice really?" Caleb opened his eyes. For a moment they were blue, then layered again, as if someone else was looking out. "It's the part of you that the chain hears before you do," he whispered. We tested once more against Ellis's better judgment. Nora leaned in, voice low but steady. "My name is Nora Whittaker. I am not afraid." 6 seconds later the walls answered. "My name is Nora Whittaker. I am already afraid." Every battery candle in the chapel guttered at once. The chain hummed so loud my teeth hurt. And then over the replay another voice cut through, not 6 seconds late but perfectly on time. It was Nora's voice, but not her mouth. It came from the chain itself, speaking in unison with her. "Next time," it said, "we won't wait 6 seconds." The lights went out. When the lights snapped back on, the chapel basement smelled of stone dust and warm iron. Caleb sat upright inside the case, chain draped across him like a sash. His eyes tracked nothing we could see. And then came the sound, not the hum we'd learned to live with. This was melody, low, steady, like a single choir note stretched into forever. Brother Oakes looked at his decibel meter, swore, and shook it. "No source, no frequency I can chart. It's there, but it's not there. Nora pressed her palms to her ears. It isn't just sound. It's inside your body like bones are vibrating. Ellis just stood still, face unreadable, as if waiting for the song to name him. We lined up objects in front of the chain like students waiting for roll call. A brass crucifix from the wall. A silver locket Nora wore under her sweater. Oakes's pocket wrench, worn smooth with years of work. My battered ritual book, unblessed metal. Oakes's wrench sat quietly. The chain ignored it. The crucifix. The song shifted key minor to major, a chord of recognition. Nora placed her locket, kissed and blessed by her child years ago. The melody deepened, layering harmony as if the chain remembered what the locket remembered. Finally, I opened my ritual book, touched the page with a psalm still echoing in my head. The chain sang back in words. Not English, not Latin, something older, syllables that hit my chest like heartbeats. "It's responding," Nora whispered. "It's accompanying us." We brought in more, rosaries, medals, even a cup of blessed water. Each object bent the melody, added voice to the unseen choir. Then something stranger. Caleb began to hum along. His mouth moved, but the notes weren't his. They were too many, layered, dissonant but resolving. His body was only the instrument. Ellis leaned forward. "This isn't containment, it's rehearsal." Oakes frowned. "For what?" Caleb's eyes opened, clear blue again for a flicker. "For the day the choir sings in unison." At 3:17, the song reached a pitch that rattled the steel door. The fluorescent panel above us stayed steady, but every organ pipe in St. Kieran's, 3 miles away and long decommissioned, began to play. The sound carried through the air vents like thunder, like lungs that had remembered breath. Nora clutched my arm. "It's not just singing back, it's teaching the world to sing." And as the final note swelled, the chain itself shifted in Caleb's lap. The braid loosened, not breaking, not opening, but reshaping into a new knot we hadn't seen. A knot that matched the glowing impressions in the quarry walls. Caleb smiled, too calm. "You hear it now, don't you? The choir doesn't need voices anymore." The last pipe blast shook the chapel. My cross burned hot against my chest, and for one terrible moment I thought I saw my own lips moving to the melody, without my consent. The morning after the chain sang, I sat alone in the chapel basement with my canonical ledger. It was the kind of book Rome loves, cream paper, hard binding, meant to outlast the men who fill it. I sharpened a pencil like my professors had drilled into me. Ink is pride, graphite is humility. I wrote the date. I wrote, case, St. Kieran/Caleb Hale/anomalous restraint. And then under my hand the pencil moved. Not guided, not possessed, just followed. The letters I formed trailed into letters I didn't. When I lifted the pencil, the ledger kept going. Words appeared in neat Roman script, identical to my hand, but faster, bolder. "Father Ray's, don't bother summarizing. The case is already filed." I slammed the book shut. The cross on my chest warmed in protest. I showed the ledger to Nora, Oakes, and Ellis. Together we opened it again. Now it was full. Entire pages inked in my own handwriting, except they weren't memories, they were predictions. 3:41 p.m. Dr. Whittaker will accuse you of hiding something. 6:12 p.m. Brother Oakes will drop his wrench and call it by the wrong name. 8:00 p.m. Ellis will make a phone call he denies making. Midnight. Caleb will ask you a question you cannot answer. Nora flipped forward. At the bottom of a later page was a single line circled 3 times. Mark Ray's volunteers. She looked at me hard. Volunteers for what? I didn't answer. I couldn't. That night I tried to ignore it, but the ledger didn't want to be ignored. Every time I left it closed, I heard the scratching of pencil on paper, steady, deliberate. When I opened it, new lines. Some were small details, Ellis coughing, Oakes muttering in his sleep. Others were sermons I hadn't preached yet, notes from confessions that hadn't been made. And one line written over and over, "You don't keep records, records keep you." Nora confronted me when she found me staring at it. "This isn't a report, Father, it's a contract." Ellis stood behind her, arms crossed. "The question is, who with?" At midnight, the ledger stopped predicting and started conversing. The pencil moved on its own under no hand carving sharp strokes. "It's time, Father. Ask Caleb the question." The case across the room clicked once. The chain hummed in harmony. Caleb's eyes opened, bright and layered, and he smiled like he'd been waiting for this cue. "Go on," he said softly. "You already know what to ask. The ledger told you." The pencil scrawled the words as my throat formed them in perfect unison. "What am I willing to become?" The lights flickered. The chain tightened into a new knot. And for the first time, my own voice repeated back at me, not 6 seconds late, not from the walls, but from Caleb's mouth. The ride took nearly 3 hours. No one spoke much. Rain glazed the windows, then stopped, then started again, like the sky couldn't make up its mind. By the time we reached the facility, the silence inside the car had grown as heavy as the weather outside. The building didn't look like anything holy. No cross, no stained glass, not even a number on the door. Just poured concrete and chain-link fencing, the kind of place you'd pass on the highway without ever asking what was inside. Ellis swiped his card at a gate, then another, then pressed his thumb against a scanner. None of us said a word. Finally, we descended a stairwell that smelled of bleach and old copper pipes. The air grew colder the deeper we went. The walls stopped feeling like architecture and started feeling like excuses. When the last steel door opened, I realized why Ellis called it a chapel. The room was square, sterile, lit by overhead fluorescents that buzzed too loudly. At the center stood an altar, but not wood or marble. Stainless steel, welded to the floor, polished until it reflected our faces back at us in warped fragments. Behind it, a tabernacle box was set into the wall, but it was locked from the outside, heavy bolts sealing it shut. A padlock dangled beneath them, almost mocking the idea of faith. The pews were benches of steel, bolted in neat rows. Each bench had restraints, manacles welded in pairs, black leather straps frayed at the edges. Brother Oakes muttered first, his voice cracked and low. "This isn't worship, it's containment." Nora swallowed hard, clutching the silver disc at her neck. "God, it looks like a prison." Caleb, still strapped inside his transport case, tilted his head toward the altar. His eyes had that faint layered shimmer again, like two depths of water colliding. "Prison or hospital, depends if you think the patient's contagious." The chain across his lap hummed once, a low vibration that seemed to recognize the room. Ellis led us forward, stopping at a wide circle etched into the floor beneath the altar. The seal was precise, 6 vast knots of interlaced brass and lead lines embedded into the concrete, each looped and twisted in impossible geometry, exactly like the impressions we'd seen in the quarry walls. But something was wrong. There were 7 spaces, not 6. The last one was empty, the concrete bare where another knot should have been. Oakes crouched, tracing the brass with his calloused fingers, complete, like a circuit missing its final switch. Nora knelt beside him, her eyes following the lines. "It's like a padlock with one tumbler gone. It looks strong, but it'll never hold under real pressure." I felt my throat tighten. Why leave it unfinished? Ellis exhaled slowly, his jaw tight. They didn't leave it unfinished, they couldn't finish it. Why not? I pressed. He didn't answer. Caleb smiled faintly in his case, his voice calm and almost kind. You've been singing the hymn without the last verse. My eyes kept drifting to the steel tabernacle set into the far wall. Its bolts were thick, its padlock rusted, but what unsettled me most wasn't the hardware, it was the scratches on the steel. Scratches in arcs, as if something inside had once scraped against the walls trying to get out. "What's in there?" I asked. Ellis didn't look at me. "Records." Oakes snorted. "That's not the kind of lock you put on paper." Ellis finally turned, his face carved from restraint. This facility was built in the 1970s. After incidents the Vatican couldn't manage alone. Defense contractors, clerics, engineers, they pooled resources. The church brought prayers, the government brought concrete. Nora's eyes narrowed. Incidents, plural. Ellis nodded once. Some were possessions, some were stranger. The files back there are sealed. Most people in this building don't even know they exist. And one of those files, I said slowly, mentions a man who vanished beneath St. Kieran's. Ellis's silence was answer enough. Caleb's lips curved in something almost like satisfaction. Me. The chain on Caleb's lap began to hum louder, vibrating in sympathy with the floor. The brass knots shimmered faintly in the harsh, fluorescent light. For a moment I thought I saw them shift, just a fraction, like the geometry was alive and correcting itself. Nora stepped back. "What's happening?" Ellis's voice dropped. Containment resonance. The system's trying to calibrate to him. Without the seventh knot, Oakes snapped. "That's suicide." I gripped my cross, but even the wood felt restless in my palm. The hum deepened, filling our chests. The air tasted of copper. Then it happened. The missing knot, the empty space on the floor, flared with light. Lines appeared where none had been etched, weaving themselves into perfect symmetry with the other six. It wasn't brass or lead. It was light itself, glowing faintly green, crawling outward like veins filling after a tourniquet is released. Every manacle on the pews snapped shut in unison, the sound like gunshots in the stillness. Nora staggered back, her face pale. What triggered it? Caleb's layered eyes opened wide, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked truly joyful. "You brought me to the choir loft." The glowing knot pulsed once, twice, like a heartbeat, and then the tabernacle door rattled violently. The outside bolt straining, the padlock trembling as if something inside had remembered it was supposed to join the song. The chapel fell quiet after the seventh knot flared to life. Too quiet, like silence had swallowed even the hum of electricity. I glanced at the wall clock. 3:17 a.m. My watch read 11:59 p.m. Nora's phone insisted it was 4:02. Brother Oakes tapped his digital timer. "Out of sync," he muttered. "All of them." Ellis's jaw tightened. "We call this the split hour." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "An hour here isn't an hour outside. Sometimes it's minutes. Sometimes days. It fractures." Nora whispered, "Fractures or multiplies." The security monitors on the wall blinked to life, showing live feeds of the chapel. At first they all showed the same thing, Caleb shackled in his case at the altar's edge. Then one screen flickered. On it, Caleb stood beside the altar, hands folded as if in prayer. Another screen showed him leaning against a pew rail, head tilted, almost amused. I turned to the case. He was still there, eyes closed, breathing slow, but the other versions of him stared out from the monitors, moving, stretching, even smiling. "Glitches?" Oakes asked, his voice thin. "No." Ellis shook his head grimly. Manifestation. This is what happens during the split hour. He's occupying more than one place at once. I forced myself to look down. Caleb's shadow wasn't where it should have been. It slid away from his body like oil poured across the floor, creeping toward the brass seal. Another shadow appeared at the far side of the room, standing upright, shaped like Caleb but untethered to him. The two shadows bowed slightly to one another. Then they moved in opposite directions, independent, deliberate. Shadows aren't supposed to have conversations, I whispered. Nora gripped her necklace so tightly her knuckles went white. They're not conversing. They're agreeing. The chain across Caleb's lap pulsed once as though in approval. I pulled my ledger from my bag, heart hammering. The pencil scrawled without my hand moving. Split hour confirmed. Subject is no longer singular. Choose which instance survives. I snapped the book shut. The wood of my cross felt hot against my palm. What did it write? Ellis demanded. Nothing you want to hear, I muttered. Caleb's eyes fluttered open. All three versions of him on the monitors opened theirs too. Three sets of lips curved in the same slow smile. Choose. The Caleb in the case whispered. The Caleb at the altar on the monitor echoed, choose. The Caleb leaning on the pew rail smiled wider. Choose. Choose what? Oakes demanded, his voice cracking. Which of me you'll keep, the Caleb said together. The others won't wait. The lights flickered violently, and then he was there. Another Caleb stepped free from the far wall, solid, breathing, casting a shadow. He walked across the floor as calmly as if he owned it. Now there were two Calebs in the chapel with us, one strapped in the case, the other standing free, his eyes glimmering like layered oceans. On the monitors, still more Calebs appeared, one pacing the quarry chamber, another sitting calmly at my desk back at the monastery, a third leaning over my ledger with my own face reflected in his. Nora's breath hitched. He's not bound to one place anymore. Ellis reached for his radio with shaking hands. This containment's compromised. The free Caleb turned to me and spoke in my own voice. Containment was never the point. Choirs don't contain songs. The fluorescence overhead buzzed, then burst, showering glass. In the darkness, dozens of Calebs whispered in unison. The split hour has begun. When the fluorescence died, emergency lights bathed the chapel in red. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, bending in directions geometry didn't allow. Ellis didn't waste time. He barked at us over the hum of the chain. Move, there's something we can use, lower storage. We hurried down a stairwell beneath the chapel, the air growing stale, the smell of ozone thickening. The sub-basement looked abandoned. Shelves of old tech, filing cabinets, boxes stamped with federal seals faded into yellow. Ellis stopped at a tarp-covered shape. He yanked the canvas free. It wasn't a weapon, it wasn't a cross. It was a machine, wooden panels bolted to steel, dials cracked with age, a small glass screen that looked like an eye that hadn't blinked in 50 years. This, Ellis said, panting, is the iconoscope. Nora frowned. Like the old televisions. Prototype, Ellis corrected, built after the Ejective 47 incident in Damascus. Designed to see things regular cameras can't. Brother Oakes squinted at it, muttering, "That's not engineering, that's a science with wires." The machine whined as Ellis twisted the dials. Tubes warmed, the glass screen fizzed to life. At first static. Then an image appeared. Not the chapel, not us. The screen showed another room, circular, stone walls etched with the same knot impressions we'd seen in the quarry. Only this time the impressions glowed. And in the center of that chamber stood Caleb, not strapped, not confined, Standing tall, his hands raised like a conductor. Around him, shadows shaped like people bowing, kneeling, some half-formed, some with too many arms. "Dear God," Nora whispered. Oakes crossed himself without realizing. I leaned in closer, throat dry. "That room isn't here, that's somewhere else." Ellis's eyes didn't leave the screen. "It's where he's spreading." The image shifted. The iconoscope wasn't just showing Caleb anymore. It was showing faces, dozens, hundreds, flickering in and out like channels being changed too fast. Some were strangers, some were people we knew. I saw Father Gregory, my old seminary friend. I saw parishioners long dead. And God help me, I saw my own reflection, lips moving in a prayer I hadn't yet said. Nora grabbed my arm. "Mark, look at the eyes." Every face had Caleb's blue eyes layered over their own. And they were all singing silently, mouths moving in unison with the chain's hum. The machine's glass screen shook as if straining to contain the image. Oakes whispered, "It's not a choir, it's a rehearsal for possession on a planetary scale." Suddenly, the static flared and the iconoscope screamed with a pitch that made my teeth ache. The screen cracked, but before it shattered, Caleb himself turned to face us, looking through the glass directly into the room. He smiled faintly. His lips moved, and for the first time the machine carried his voice. "You finally found the choir director." The screen went black, and then behind us in the real chapel above, the chain answered with a deafening chord, so loud it rattled the walls, so deep it felt like the earth itself was being tuned. Nora staggered. It heard him, it's sinking. Ellis's face drained of color. "No, he's not sinking with it, it's sinking with him." The emergency lights flickered, pulsed, once, twice, like a heartbeat. And from the shattered iconoscope, faint light spilled onto the floor, forming outlines of more faces, more eyes. They were looking up at us. When the iconoscope went dark, we stumbled back up into the chapel. The seventh knot on the floor still glowed faintly, like embers refusing to die. I sat down heavily on a pew and opened my ledger. The pages weren't blank. They weren't even mine anymore. Every sheet was filled, front and back, with names, thousands of them, written in my own handwriting. Parishioners I'd served in Boston, priests from seminary, faces I'd glimpsed once on a subway, even the name of my mother, written 3 times in 3 different styles of script. Nora leaned over my shoulder, her breath caught. "Those aren't just names, they are entries, records." Brother Oakes squinted. "Records of what?" Before I could answer, the pencil slid across the page without my hand touching it. It scrawled one line, deliberate, sharp. "The choir keeps the roll." Ellis snatched the ledger from me and flipped through the pages. His face grew pale as he scanned. "These aren't just names," he said slowly. "These are statuses. Some are marked present, others are marked pending." He held the book open. My stomach turned. Next to my own name, written in bold graphite, were the words, "Volunteered." Nora's face tightened. "That's what we saw back in part 6. The book predicted this." I shook my head. "I didn't volunteer. I never." But Caleb's voice floated from the case at the altar, calm, almost amused. "You don't have to volunteer. The ledger does it for you." The chain hummed. The ledger's pages began to rustle as though caught in a wind none of us felt. Names shifted, letters sliding like living script. Then the chapel filled with whispers, dozens of voices, all speaking their own names at once. Some sounded like children, some like old men. One of them, "God help me," was my own voice, repeating my name as though confirming attendance at roll call. "Present," the voices said. "Present, present." Oak staggered back, his face ashen. "It's a census. It's counting us into the choir." Nora grabbed the ledger from Ellis, slammed it shut, and hissed, "How do we stop it?" Caleb's layered eyes opened slowly, glowing faintly in the dim light. You can't stop a hymn. You can only decide if you'll sing in key. The ledger trembled in Nora's hands. Then it tore itself open to a blank page. The pencil rolled across the floor, lifted slightly, and began to write. Not names this time, but a question. Whose name will be next? The pew restraints clanged shut, one after another, metal cuffs snapping in rhythm like percussion. The seventh knot on the floor pulsed, brighter now, every throb a beat. And then on the fresh page, the ledger began to write three names at once. Nora Whittaker, Brother Oakes, Father Mark Rays. The pencil paused, hovering over the paper, waiting to finish one of them. Nora whispered almost to herself, "It's asking us to choose." The pencil tip pressed down again, slowly scratching the first letter. The pencil hovered, scratching the first letter of my name when the chapel itself trembled. Not violently, subtly, like the vibration of a train passing somewhere beneath us. Then it came, a bell tone, deep, resonant, impossibly far away and impossibly close at once. The sound seemed to arrive through the bones, not the ears. Brother Oakes looked around, bewildered. "There's no bell tower in this building." Nora pressed both hands over her necklace as though steadying herself. "It isn't coming from outside. It's inside the seal." The seventh knot pulsed in perfect rhythm with the bell, the glow deepening with every strike. Caleb smiled faintly, his voice layered and calm. "The choir has found its metronome." Ellis snapped, "This facility has no bells. It was never built with one." He shouted as if denial could drown the sound. The iconoscope shards on the basement floor rattled, vibrating in time with the bell, and then on the security monitors the image flickered. For a moment the feed showed the outline of a tower, massive and skeletal, standing above the building where none existed. Its spire was jagged, unfinished. And yet the bell within it tolled, each strike rolling through us like thunder in marrow. Oakes whispered hoarsely, "That thing, it's not made of stone. It's made of voices stacked on top of each other." The chain hummed louder, the links trembling against Caleb's chest. The ledger flipped itself open again, pages fluttering in the phantom wind. The bell tolled once more, and another name scrawled across the blank page, Nora Whittaker, present. Nora's knees buckled. She clutched at me, gasping. "It's not just writing, it's pulling." I felt something like a thread inside me snapped into place. Her voice cracked. "Mark, I didn't answer. I didn't say yes, it answered for me." Caleb laughed softly, the sound oddly tender. "That's what bells do. They don't ask, they announce." Ellis slammed the ledger shut, but the pencil kept writing on the cover. Brother Oakes pending. Oakes swore under his breath and staggered backward until his shoulders hit the steel door. His eyes darted between us. "Don't let it call me, don't let it," the bell tolled again. This time the sound shook dust from the rafters. The emergency lights flickered. And on the seventh toll, the padlocked tabernacle in the wall burst open. The bolts screeched, the padlock snapped like cheap wire, and the heavy steel door swung outward with a groan. Inside wasn't paper, not records, not files. It was a shape, something bound in chains identical to Caleb's, shriveled and gray, its eyes sealed shut with wax, its lips sewn. But as the bell rang again, its eyes snapped open, glowing the same layered blue as Caleb's. Caleb tilted his head, smiling with recognition. The first singer wakes. The bell boomed one final time, shaking the room, and the chained figure inside the tabernacle smiled back. The figure chained inside the tabernacle leaned forward, bones creaking like old timber. Wax crumbled from its eyelids as it blinked for the first time in decades. Its sewn lips tore apart as it exhaled. a sound halfway between a sigh and the beginning of a note. Nora staggered back, covering her ears. "No, no, this isn't possible." Oakes whispered, "God help us, there are two of them now." Caleb, still strapped in his transport case, smiled gently. His layered eyes gleamed. "Correction. There have always been many, you just needed a bell to hear them." The seventh knot pulsed brighter, synchronizing with the breath of the new figure. The air thickened. Dust swirled in currents that moved like invisible lungs. The ledger on the pew burst open again, pages flapping until they lay flat. New names scrawled in graphite: Oakes present, Whitaker present, Rays pending. Each name was followed by faint marks, notes on a staff, music, and then the chapel filled with whispers. At first chaotic, then weaving into chords, fragments of melody. Every voice carried the same undercurrent, the hum of the chain, now layered into something unmistakable. A hymn. I clutched my cross, but it burned in my hand, hotter than it ever had. Ellis barked at us, his voice raw with fear. "Don't listen, cover your ears." But it didn't matter. The voices weren't just in our ears anymore. They were inside our chests, vibrating against bone and blood. Nora gasped, tears streaming down her cheeks. "They're not singing to us, they're singing through us." The security monitors crackled back to life. Every screen showed a different location, the quarry walls glowing with knot impressions. The monastery cell where I'd first prayed over Caleb, the iconoscope chamber in fragments, and dozens more places none of us recognized. But in every location a figure stood. Some wore priestly robes, some were nuns, some were children, some looked inhuman, their limbs bent at impossible angles. All of them were singing the same hymn in silence. Oakes's breath came ragged. "This isn't containment, this is a roll call across centuries." Caleb's voice came layered and deep. "Not centuries, dimensions." The chained figure from the tabernacle lifted its head fully now, voice rising in harmony with Caleb's. The hymn swelled, rattling the pews, shaking the floor beneath us. And then every manacle in the chapel snapped open at once. The restraints on the benches, the cuffs in the walls, even the clasps binding Caleb's transport case. Metal clanged to the floor like the opening notes of a symphony. Caleb stood free, the chain draped across his shoulders like a vestment. He looked at the new singer, who now smiled with lips torn and raw. Together they turned to us. "Two voices," Caleb said softly. "A duet, but a choir must be more." The seventh knot flared so bright we had to shield our eyes, and from somewhere far beyond the chapel, bells answered back. The bells outside, or wherever outside meant now, were no longer distant. Their tolling grew nearer, each strike pulling at the air like a tide. The two singers in the chapel, Caleb and the figure from the tabernacle, began to walk in slow rhythm with the tolls, not toward the door, not toward freedom, but in a circuit, circling the glowing knot on the floor. Their footsteps left faint imprints of light in the concrete, as though the ground itself remembered their path. Nora's voice trembled. "What are they doing?" Ellis's answer was dry, hollow, a processional, a ritual march. Every liturgy begins with one. Brother Oakes swallowed hard. Except processions are supposed to lead somewhere. The security monitors lit up again, this time not random locations, this time corridors inside the facility. On screen, guards in plain uniforms began moving in step with the bells. They weren't marching with discipline. They weren't even conscious of it. Their feet just fell in rhythm. Their eyes were open but empty. One by one they entered the chapel, filing into the pews without resistance. Each sat down, folding their hands, faces blank as icons. Nora hissed, "They are their acolytes now." Ellis tried his radio, nothing but static. Caleb glanced at the pews, smiling faintly. Every procession needs witnesses. The walls themselves began to resonate, humming in tune with the hymn. Cracks spread in the plaster, but instead of dust, light leaked through, thin green threads like veins under skin. The hymn wasn't just sound anymore, it was architecture. Oakes pressed his hand against one fissure, then yanked it back with a gasp. "It's warm." The ledger on the bench snapped open again. Pages filled themselves with lines of music notation, clefs and bars, notes stacked so thick they blurred into black. At the bottom of the page, words appeared in neat script, processional complete when all names are written. And below it, Rays pending. The singers stopped circling. They faced us now, standing on either side of the seventh knot like guardians of a gate. The bells tolled again, louder, faster. The walls shook, the pews rattled, and then something impossible. The aisle between the pews stretched, not physically, not spatially, but it felt longer. Each blink it grew until the altar seemed miles away, a road paved in light. Down that road, more figures appeared, half-formed, shadowed, eyes glowing layered blue. They walked in rhythm toward us, each step a toll of the bell. The processional had begun, and it wasn't just inside the chapel anymore. Nora gripped my arm, whispering, "Mark, they are coming here." The ledger wrote one final line across the page, the graphite gouging deep into the paper. "Stand and join the march." The aisle between the pews stretched longer with every toll of the unseen bell. At first, I told myself it was an illusion, forced perspective, stress. But no, I counted steps. From altar to pew should have been 12 paces. Now it was 50, then 100. The glowing knot on the floor pulsed brighter, widening into a circle of living light. It didn't just illuminate, it invited. Caleb and the second singer stood on either side like guardians of a doorway, their layered blue eyes fixed on me as if I were the one meant to walk through first. Nora clutched my sleeve. "Mark, don't move. Whatever that is, it's not for us." Ellis's jaw was tight, but his voice cracked. "It is for him, it's always been." The guards seated in the pews began chanting, not words but hums, guttural and steady, weaving into the hymn already vibrating in the walls. Their mouths hung slack, their eyes glazed, but the sound was perfectly in tune. Brother Oakes stood, fists clenched. "We can't just watch this, we need to stop it." Nora grabbed his wrist. "And how do you propose we stop something that rewrote the building around us?" He yanked his arm free. "We do what engineers always do, we find the stress point and break it before it breaks us." But before he could move, the pew restraints snapped open again and clamped him down. Oakes shouted, struggling, his voice drowned by the hymn. The ledger flipped pages and scrawled fast. Oakes secured. The light from the knot spread outward, crawling up the walls, filling cracks, tracing the air like invisible architecture. And then I saw it, a faint outline in the glow, like a door being drawn from the inside out. Caleb spoke softly, his voice layered, kind but terrible. "Every choir needs a threshold. Every threshold needs someone to cross first. That's you, Father Rays." I gripped my cross so hard I thought the wood might split. "Why me?" The second singer smiled through torn lips. His voice rasped like stone grinding on stone. "Because your name is already written." The ledger lay open. My name glowed faintly across the page. Mark Rays pending. The aisle stretched further, impossibly long now, leading straight into the glowing door at the knot's heart. Beyond it, shapes moved, dozens, maybe hundreds, shadowed figures waiting, humming the same note in expectation. The bell tolled again, shaking the chapel to its foundations. The chained figure raised his hands. Caleb mirrored him. Together they spoke, their voices resonating as one. "Step across, Father. The threshold doesn't open without you." The guard's chant grew louder. Nora screamed at me, "Don't you dare move." But the floor itself shifted beneath my feet, pulling me toward the aisle, each step in rhythm with the bells. The ledger scratched across its own page. Procession incomplete. Threshold awaiting raise. And for the first time, the glowing door knocked back. The glowing outline in the knot didn't just shimmer anymore. It pulsed, beating in rhythm with the unseen bell. And then, as though reversing logic, the door exhaled. A draft of air rolled out across the chapel, damp and cold, smelling faintly of limestone and candle wax long burned out. Nora gagged, covering her mouth. "God, it smells like a tomb." The chained singer beside Caleb tilted his head. "Not a tomb, a cradle." Brother Oak strained against his restraints, face red. "You're not dragging Rays through that thing." Caleb's smile was calm, almost gentle. "We don't have to drag him. The threshold pulls what it wants." The ledger snapped open again, pages turning like a storm until they stopped on a single blank sheet. The pencil hovered, then wrote one line with slow, deliberate strokes. "An offering is required." Ellis barked, his voice hoarse, desperate. "Offering? What does that mean?" The pencil moved again, this time scratching harder, gouging the page. A name must be given. And then, without warning, it began to scrawl furiously. Oakes, Whitaker, Rays, over and over, names cycling like a roulette wheel. Nora's voice cracked. "It's choosing one of us." The bell tolled again. This time the sound rattled the ledger itself. The pencil stopped mid-spin and pressed so hard into the page that it tore through. When the paper stilled, one word was written there in jagged strokes. "Volunteer." Caleb's eyes gleamed. "Every choir needs a first voice. Every ritual needs a gift freely given." I shouted over the hum, "But no one wants to join you." The second singer rasped through his ruined lips, "Not want, yield." Oak snarled, thrashing against the cuffs. "Take me then, better me than him." The ledger immediately scratched across the page. Oak's offering rejected. He froze, wide-eyed. Rejected. Nora clutched the cross at her throat, whispering prayers through clenched teeth. The ledger's pencil shifted, and the next name written was mine. The chapel shook violently as the bell struck once more. Dust rained from the rafters. The glowing door widened, light spilling across the aisle until it licked at the edges of my shoes. The ledger scrawled furiously, filling half a page with the same line repeated. "Raise pending offering." Caleb stepped closer, free of his case now, the chain draped like a stole over his shoulders. His voice was low, almost tender. "You don't have to fight it, Father. You've already been written." The chained figure raised his torn mouth and sang a single, piercing note. The pews vibrated. The restraints around my wrists snapped open, not to free me but to guide me. The aisle stretched again, impossibly long, leading into the blinding light of the door. And on the ledger, one final phrase carved itself so deeply the paper tore through. "An offering must cross. Tonight." The chapel groaned like a living thing. The glowing door at the heart of the seventh knot widened, stretching upward until it touched the ceiling. Light poured out, not white, not holy, but fractured green and gold, like sunlight filtering through deep water. It pulled. Every breath I took was dragged toward it. My feet slid forward, though I hadn't moved. The air itself seemed angled into the door's hunger. Nora screamed, grabbing my arm with both hands. "Mark, fight it." Her grip was real, human, desperate, but the pull was stronger. Caleb stepped aside with almost priestly grace, the chain coiled across his shoulders, his blue eyes serene. Every benediction ends with a sending forth. You know this, Father. The guards in the pews raised their voices now, not hums but words. Their chant was familiar, twisted. Ite missa est. The Mass is ended. The Latin rolled out of their slack mouths, mechanical and reverent at once. Each syllable shook the floor. The chained singer joined, his broken lips moving in time, the hymn layering with the dismissal. And then Caleb turned his gaze on me. Do you hear it? The blessing isn't to dismiss you, it's to send you through. The ledger flipped its last page. The pencil carved 3 words, Ray's offering confirmed. Brother Oakes roared, straining against his bonds until his wrists bled. Take me instead, you hear me? Take me. The ledger scratched instantly. Oakes rejected. He sobbed, shaking as if even his defiance had been weighed and found unworthy. Nora, trembling, thrust her silver necklace into my hand. Hold on to this, please. It's blessed, it's mine. Don't let them take all of you. The chain hummed louder, drowning her voice. Ellis finally spoke, his face pale, defeated. Maybe this is what the seal was always for, not to stop him, but to guide him. The bell struck once more, deafening, final, and I was pulled forward. The aisle no longer had pews, no walls, no ceiling, just an endless corridor of light stretching toward the door that waited open like a mouth. I stumbled, necklace clutched in my fist, ledger heavy at my side. Behind me, Nora screamed my name. Oakes cursed God. Ellis whispered something I couldn't hear. Ahead, Caleb extended a hand. His voice was layered, infinite, tender. This is not death, Father. This is the true benediction. Step into what was always waiting. I crossed. For one instant, the world inverted. My skin was not skin. My thoughts were not mine. I saw the choir in its fullness, endless figures, each with layered eyes, each singing threads of reality into shape. And they looked at me. Welcome, they sang, the offering is received. I saw earth below like a grain of dust. I saw time folding like sheets of paper. I saw myself split in a dozen directions, one kneeling in the chapel, one writing in the ledger, one already among them, singing. The necklace in my hand burned bright, pulling me back, anchoring me to a body I no longer trusted. And then darkness. I woke in the chapel again, on the floor before the altar. The glowing knot had dimmed. The door was gone. Nora knelt beside me, weeping. Mark, you're here. You're still here. Oakes stared at me like he was seeing something terrible. Ellis refused to meet my eyes. The ledger lay open on the floor beside me. The last entry in my own hand read, Ray's present, but underneath it, faint and shimmering in letters that weren't mine. The benediction is not an ending. It is a beginning. And in the reflection of the steel altar, I saw my eyes, layered blue,